evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on YouTube Live for this virtual cocktail of science. It's a first for us and for you too. So for those of you who are watching who don't know me, my name is Sheridan Gould and I'm the Executive Director of Weitzman UK. I'm really sorry that the current circumstances are stopping us from meeting in person right now, but I'm very pleased that you've decided to join us on this YouTube Live link. Since the pandemic hit, the Weitzman Institute has really swung into action and it's making great advances to address the challenge of COVID-19. In recent months, the Weitzman scientists have been taking part in numerous online sessions to share the Institute's frontline efforts to tackle this unprecedented global pandemic. However, as it is clear for now, we must all continue to observe social distancing measures, and most likely from some time to come. So, we wanted to showcase some of the cutting-edge science currently being undertaken at the Weitzman Institute beyond the coronavirus. The idea for Making Connections began in 2008, at a time when we unfortunately saw an increase in academic boycotts of Israel. The programme was created as a positive response to that backdrop. Making Connections establishes scientific collaboration between Weitzman Institute scientists and their UK colleagues, providing funding for joint research projects to be undertaken over a 2-year period. It allows the scientists to work together, to exchange ideas, and to explore where their collaborative research may lead. This is a donor-funded programme, and thanks to the generosity of our supporters, 2 years ago, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Making Connections programme. I'm delighted that we are joined this evening by 2 pairs of scientists from the UK and Israel, who are both recipients of this year's Making Connections grants. I'm sure that everyone joining us online will be, by now, familiar with the joys of modern technology that allows us to reach you from the comfort of your own home. So it's therefore very fitting that the scientific theme for this evening's evening is the virtual world, exploring questions around the role that artificial intelligence, AI, is increasingly playing on all of our lives. I will shortly hand over to our moderator for this evening, Professor Benny Chain. Benny is a professor of immunology at UCL and a long-standing friend and trustee of Weitzman UK. He is also a scientific advisor to the board and has been on the Making Connections Grant Selection Committee since its inception of the programme in 2008 under the leadership of our last president, Lord Parry Mitchell. But before I hand over, we're going to watch a brief film and hear firsthand from those scientists who have benefited from Making Connections grants on the value of this extraordinary programme in enabling scientific collaboration. Thank you.
When you take 2 individuals who are creative in their own separate areas, ideas are just going to flourish.
I think that's how big discoveries come from, because you mix skills and facilities and thinking to something else.
And by bringing those 2 creative minds together, new things are going to come from it that are emergent, that you cannot predict. And they are always going to come from this. This is, I think, what science tells us, and history certainly tells us.
The Making Connections program for myself and for my UK partner was extremely important because we were looking for funding that was tailored to fit our project, to collaborate scientifically, to exchange visits and to be in contact and to do the science together in a way that without this funding would not have happened.
It brought in a particular chemistry to understand the mechanisms that allow the cancer cells to reprogram themselves and the depression of the treatment.
To translate that into a drug or a treatment or a therapy that would help people with HER2-positive breast cancer and hopefully save lives.
Weitzman really celebrate thinking and thinkers and people who do fundamental research.
You look for different angles to different kind of thinking.
Who knows whether this is one of those eureka moments where you discover a pathway which really does stop mosquitoes getting malaria.
This project that Jake and I are working on is so important. Malaria is still a devastating disease in humans. It kills 1,000 children every day.
We like to think that science is a pure process, but actually we're heavily influenced by culture. And we can only gain by communicating or exchanging ideas with people who have a slightly different cultural outlook, because they will see things differently. And somehow that is enough to make stuff happen, you know, that wouldn't happen otherwise.
It allowed us to spontaneously think, over coffee one day and implement it almost the next.
The sum was small, the catalytic effect was tenfold. It's only when you're really supporting someone who's to take a courageous path, you've got a real likelihood of them making the luck that will make it break.
Science works always in collaborations these days. I think it's unheard of for one person to invent something by themselves.
The projects have been very cross-disciplinary, and we've managed to involve many different centres in the UK.
And that collaboration, that cooperation, that exchange of ideas, the Weizmann Institute stands at the very centre of that sort of activity, to what is the very best that Israel has to offer.
Thank you, Sheridan, for that introduction. I'm also sorry, obviously, that we can't meet with our Weizmann friends and colleagues in person, and it hasn't been possible to visit the Institute for us from abroad this year. But it's fantastic that Sheridan and her team have given us this opportunity to hear from some of the Weizmann scientists and their collaborators here in the UK. If I can just add to what Sheridan said about the Making Connections programme, when we started this programme just over a decade ago, we had two really criteria. The first, as for all Weizmann activities, was to make sure that the science and the scientists were outstanding. But there was an additional ingredient, and that was that we felt that we should try and promote collaboration between the UK and Weizmann. In looking back over the history of two countries, one very young country and one rather older country, both have a remarkable history and tradition of outstanding science. And so it seems to make sense to put those two things together. And actually, it's remarkable that now, in the wake of the COVID epidemic, these two issues of having good science and of increasing the impact of science by allowing and facilitating international collaboration has now become obvious, I think, to all. So it was kind of prophetic in that sense. The program has been amazingly successful beyond what I thought we could achieve. Every year over the last 12 years, we've had 15, 20 different projects, all of them outstanding in quality, from partners between the UK and Weizmann. Sadly, we haven't been able to fund them all, and after a lot of difficulty, we've managed each year to whittle them down to about 5. This year, the breadth of projects was so large and the quality so high that we really were struggling, and we asked the board to consider funding an additional project. So this year we have actually 6 joint projects, and we're going to hear a little bit about them now. And just before I introduce the speakers, if you do want to, science is all about asking questions, and we very much hope that our audience today will also be asking some questions. So if you do have questions, email them to samantha@weitzman.org.uk, and she will make sure that we get them, and I will pose them to the speakers at the end of the session. It'd be great to have a lot of questions. So let me start by introducing our Israeli scientist, Yonina Eldar. Yonina started her studies at Tel Aviv University, where she studied physics and electrical engineering. She then moved to the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology, commonly known as MIT, where she did her PhD, and she's in fact still a visiting professor at MIT. And then she returned and became professor at the Technion. And then the Weizmann were very fortunate, I think, to recruit her. She joined the Weizmann only last year as the professor of electrical engineering. Yonina's internationally renowned for her work on signal processing, which for those who are not familiar with the term, basically means how we transmit these enormous amounts of data around the world in a speedy but trustworthy way. And that underlies almost everything that we do, particularly, for example, events like this wouldn't be possible without the basis of signal processing. She's a member of the the Israeli Academy of Sciences and Humanities. She was selected as one of the 50 most influential Israeli women, and we're very much looking forward to hearing about this project in a few minutes. So let's now turn to the UK partner, who is Professor Miguel Rodriguez from UCL. He's actually my colleague at UCL, although UCL is such an enormous institution that we haven't, I don't think, actually met outside this actual event. Professor Rodriguez is Professor of Information Theory and Processing, and he's at the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering. The borders between different departments, computer science and engineering and so on, are very fluid, both at UCL actually and at the Weizmann, so in almost any department. But he's also a fellow of the Turing Institute. The Turing Institute, for those who don't know, was set up by the UK government just a few years ago. It's the sort of centre for data science and artificial intelligence, the hub for all the UK activity in that area. So thank you very much, both of you, for participating in this project. And perhaps I can start by asking you, tell us a little bit about what the project is actually going to be about and how it came to pass that you met and came up with this idea.
So thank you very much. Maybe with your permission, before we actually begin by answering your questions, we'd like to thank the Making Connections program for their support of our collaboration and research. And I think it's really very meaningful to us to be able to work under this umbrella, especially because we both strongly identify with the ideals and the goals behind the Making Connections program. We both have strong connections to the UK, which makes this even more meaningful. Miguel obviously is a professor in the UK. For me, even though I'm in Israel, my mother was actually born in England, and her late uncle was Lord Jacobowitz, who was the first chief rabbi to enter the House of Lords. So we really do have strong connections with England. In fact, my mother's parents actually met in Shefford. So they were both evacuated there during the war, where they took children from London, and they ended up staying in houses next to each other, and that's really how they met. So to me, my roots are really in London and Shefford, and therefore I have all of you to thank for being where I am.
That's great.
So coming back to our particular project, so we are extremely excited about the project that we'll be working on that sits within the area of artificial intelligence, and in particular trustworthy artificial intelligence. And I think most people nowadays are very familiar with AI, so it's reported on the media, but also specialized journals all understand how these algorithms work. So we know how to get them to operate, but we do not understand how they work. And many of the established theories that some of the best minds in the field have been developing, say, for the past 20, 30 years, they just do not apply when it comes to deep neural networks. So essentially, these are black boxes that provide amazing performance, but we cannot justify why they work the way they do.
So as Miguel explained, AI methods are becoming more and more pervasive. But the problem is that if we don't understand them, we're not going to always feel comfortable using them. So just as an example, how many of you would feel comfortable getting on a plane that you know is flown by an AI algorithm without any physical pilot on the plane? Or how many of you would feel comfortable going to the doctor's office, but instead of meeting a physician like we're used to doing, you're going to basically meet an algorithm, and that algorithm is going to diagnose you. So I imagine not many of you would feel comfortable in these scenarios. I know that I wouldn't. Just trying to formulate that on a deeper level, since currently we don't fully understand AI methods, there are naturally many concerns about the safety, the security, the trustworthiness, whether the outcomes are reliable or not. And this is particularly important in applications where we can't tolerate error, like health or autonomous driving. So we can't just say, well, you know, most of the time it's going to work okay, and once in a while it will fail. That's okay for certain applications, maybe transferring images, but less acceptable, of course, when it comes to our health or driving or anything that concerns safety or privacy of patients. So our project is really coming in at that place. So what we hope to be able to do is to bring together mathematical and statistical tools from various different fields, from fields that both Miguel and I have been working on, information theory, optimization, and statistics, and to use that to gain more insight into both the performance and also the limitations of these AI methods, and on a deeper level, trying to understand the reliability of different decisions that are made by these algorithms. We also hope that by bringing in these tools, we'll be able to come up with new types of methods that could draw on our basic understanding of different physical models, and instead of AI methods just being black box, being able to incorporate more structure into the algorithms, with the hope that this will both give us a better understanding of the decisions that are made and also give us a measure of reliability on the different decisions that are made by these algorithms.
Sounds fascinating. How did you actually come to get together to put this project together? I mean, how did you meet, and how did you have the idea of working together in partnership?
So yeah, so we've met about 5 years ago or so, and at that time I was organizing with various American colleagues a conference, and in particular I was tasked with the idea of bringing of organizing a special session and bringing some of the best European researchers to this conference. And of course I was very familiar with Yonina's work, so I knew her work. I knew her standing in the field, so I've invited Yonina to come to this conference, and Yonina has very kindly accepted the invite. So we met during the conference, so we have spent many hours discussing, sharing ideas. So we have realized that we have many common interests, and that particular seat, those set of conversations that we had over 3 days or so, then it essentially translated into a research program that has now lasted, very much for 5 years. So it has led, so far to a book, several research papers. We have also had many students from my side and Yonina's side come and visit each other's group, and the collaboration has been growing. So it was natural for us to draw upon our expertise in signal processing, information theory, optimization, statistics, and try now to tackle some of the most pressing problems that we are faced with, and in particular problems associated with AI and how to put some theory and explainability around AI type of methods.
And if the project is successful, hopefully it will be successful, how do you see the sort of future in terms of this work? I mean, what kind of impact could it have on the world of AI?
Right, I think that there's many open problems nowadays in the area of artificial intelligence. So as we have mentioned, we do not know how to explain artificial intelligence. It lacks its explainability, it lacks interpretability, and therefore many people claim that it's not always safe or secure or even trustworthy to use AI methods. So we are hoping that with the techniques that we plan to develop during the course of this research and this program, we'll be able to cast some light into some of these algorithms, and therefore do great contributions, hopefully, that will have lasting impact in, say, society, in science, but also in our economies.
So maybe I could add to that. I think I do a lot of work with people, let's say, from biology and physics, and I think particularly in these domains, because they're maybe less comfortable with methods that they don't understand or don't draw upon the models that they know and develop. A lot of them are more nervous from using these methods, and it's not exploited as much as it can be. So we also hope that by incorporating models and making these boxes less black box and more insight into their operation, other fields of science will use these techniques as well. And we really hope in some sense to be a bridge, where by translating these methods from totally data-driven to also having insight and models, we could kind of make a bridge into areas of biology and physics where we believe these could really help solve challenging problems that cannot be solved only by models. There's a lot of phenomena that we can no longer model just by simple equations. So we hope that we could serve as a bridge in that sense. I'd also like to say that we do hope to have an impact on industry. So that's something that we're both very interested in, not only developing theory, but really getting it to be used and to make AI more reliable, safer for users to feel more comfortable with it. So that's also a goal that's very important to us. And finally, I think we both share the vision of, besides the work itself, increasing the ties between Israel and the UK, between Israel and Europe, and within Europe. So it's something that's very important to both of us. I think one of the reasons that we like working a lot together is that we're both very collaborative in nature. We like discussing ideas, meeting at conferences, sharing students back and forth. We share a lot of the style of research, and it's something that I think we'd like to expand to other colleagues and have a network of people working on these problems that are really challenging and really require many people to get together and work on together to have significant results.
Thank you very much. Sounds a fantastic project, and we wish you all possible success in it. So now let's move on to the second project that we're going to talk about tonight. And let me start again from the Weizmann Institute. So first of all, Giora Alexandron, he's a senior scientist and assistant professor in the Department of Science Education. And his background is also in application of science and technology to education. He was the director of the Center for Educational Technology and also involved in applications of AI to education at MIT. And so from the UK, we have Alexandra Chrystia, who's Professor of Computer Science in Durham, and heads a group on innovative computing there. And in addition to her research, she's involved in some remarkable outreach programs to increase diversity and inclusion of women and minority groups in computer science, an area where they're still woefully underrepresented. Alexandra and Giora, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what the project that you proposed to do is all about and how you came to pull it together.
Yes, so thank you very much, Benny. And we are very happy to be here and very thankful for this event and the opportunity. So first of all, this project is about science education and how we want to teach science in K-12 schools. Now, you might ask, why should we teach science at schools? But, well, just raise some of the global challenges that we are facing, and many of them, they involve science, or science is the way to deal with them, and we need the pipeline of people who can do that in the future. And also, if we just look outside from the window, then and we look into our society, we understand how important it is to teach science to the future citizens of our society. And then, well, we start to ask ourselves, how do we teach science? So we want it to be personalized, because we know that people are different in how they learn. And well, we know that personalized learning helps. And we know that both from science tells us that people who receive personalized learning, they get better results. But also, if we go backwards, and the Bible already told us that train up a child in the way he should go. So we have a lot of evidence that personalized learning would help us to provide better science education. And that's where our work comes in, because we ask ourselves, well, how do we do personalized learning? And that's where we believe that artificial intelligence has a lot of potential to help us, because basically the idea that drives our research is that we can take big data and algorithms, and together we can use these computational approaches in order to understand individual differences in how different people learn, and we can then understand what is good for each different learners. And when I'm saying we, then I'm talking about our joint group or a lab or collaborations that we are now forming, Alexandra and me, but also about the physics education group, the Weizmann Institute and the biology education group, because it's a disciplinary effort, eventually how we deliver science education, how we take AI and use it to deliver personalized education, because AI is not a magic. It needs to work with humans, the teachers and the learners who are involved in this process. And there are many challenges here. So how, for example, you explain AI? So we are using AI in order to help teachers understand what is good to each child, but we need to explain the result of the algorithm to the teacher. And if the teacher doesn't understand the rationale behind this recommendation, then the teacher would not use this recommendation. And basically, we want to empower the teachers. We are not about replacing the teachers. We are looking into the challenges, how we take AI and use it in order to empower the teachers. So that's the challenge.
This research was extremely exciting, especially because I've been working in personalization for many years now, more than 20 years, and personalization of education. And it's a field that still is giving, basically. But what is really exciting is that we're also moving towards the teachers and the teacher support. And I started talking about this, but it's basically we need to personalize not just to the learners but also for the teachers, because as you can see in this virtual world that we're living now, we each encounter lots of issues all the time, and having some support and some system that can help us and guide us according to our own needs is very, very important. And this is part of what I find extremely interesting in this new work that we're putting together.
So how did this project come about? How did it start?
Right. So we met at quite relatively recently in 2019 at the EDM conference, at the Educational Data Mining Conference. And I was asked to give a little anecdote. I can do that. It's we were actually trying to take a cab together to go to the plane to the airport, and the cab driver came. We waited for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Finally, a cab driver arrived, and then he just looked at us. He said, "Where do you want to go?" We said, "Well, to the airport." We're all there with luggage. It was quite obvious in my mind, but anyway. And he just took off. He said, "No, I don't want to take you." Yeah, and then we had to find yet another one, if you remember, Giora. So yeah, that was our first encounter. And then we had, because of that, we had a really long research talk whilst waiting for the cab driver, and then in the cab. So.
Great. But sometimes it's worth waiting.
Yes. In terms of our respective complementarity, so Giora, as you've seen, has been working for quite a while in learning and also in, I suppose, the hardware part of learning and the implementational side and the actual interaction with the learners, the teachers, and so on and so forth. I've been working more on the research side of this. My background is partially in semantic web, social web, but also in personalization and adaptation on the web in general. And more recently, I've been working quite a lot also on gamification. So for those of you who don't know what gamification is
I was going to ask you that.
Yes, it's introduction of game elements in in systems which are not games. So things like leaderboards, things like competition, collaboration, or support thereof. All these are gamification elements, and these can be introduced also in learning environments. So there is a difference between a learning environment which is a game and a learning environment which is gamified. So the purpose of it is just learning. It's not to play a game, but there are things that support you that are a little bit like a game, and that has been shown in various other settings to enhance motivation of learners of various ages, but there's a lot of theory behind it, what kind of types of gamification is appropriate for what kind of people and ages and groups and so forth. So we looked at all these aspects. So hence we have quite a good complementarity, and we can bring this sort of more theoretical as well as more practical aspects together. And I would like to see, as you've introduced earlier, I want to see actually the products of our research in practice and not just on paper in research papers. So for me, it's exciting also from this point of view that we're going to see something happening. We're going to have at the end of this project actually something built in a system that is working. And I mean, I know that Sheridan has introduced at the beginning our projects as being outside of the COVID area, but in fact, we're all now working online, and this is an e-learning program and an e-learning project. So I think it's quite related with this new world we're in. So I think it's extremely appropriate also from this point of view.
Yeah, so if I may add to what Alexandra just said, so actually we have since the COVID crisis that there are no schools. So actually we have teachers knocking on the door. They want to use our systems because they need to they want to deliver science education to their students. So the focus of the systems that we are working on is on physics and science education, and basically those teachers are coming to the science education groups and they want to join the project and to work with us. And one of the things that we are trying to understand is how to use AI in order to well, we need the crowd. We want the crowd, the teachers and the learner to use the system, and then once they are in, they provide data and wisdom into the system that we can use in order to make it better for the new comers, the new teachers and students. And one of the main challenges that we do see is how to incentivize the teachers and students once they are in to use the tools and to learn with the system and to be engaged with it and to provide the data and information that we need in order to make it better. And that's one of the things that makes this connection so highly potential, because Alexandra's expertise in how to design systems in ways that increase incentive address exactly the challenges that we are facing with building those systems. So I think that together we can indeed make systems that would help not only to, that would produce not only scientific papers, but also actual value to teachers and students.
Fantastic. It sounds great. So now we've got time, I think, for some questions and answers. And I'll hand you over to Sheridan.
you, Benny, for your chairing of these two sets of speakers. And I think, as many of us experienced, virtual reality and AI is not always trustworthy. Hopefully we're now back on stream and no more glitches. I'm going to shortly hand back to Benny to hold the Q&A, and lots of questions are flooding in. But I'm actually going to take the liberty in my position as Director of Weitzman UK to ask my own first question to kick off. It's been fascinating to hear from the academics, Janina and Miguel, on their research, and from our science educators, Giora and Alexandra. But I'd just be interested to have just a few words from you all, and perhaps Benny too, about what is the difference about research going on in academic institutions and in industry in places such as Apple and Google. And perhaps I'll invite Janina. Could you just kick us off on that with a few sentences and perhaps pass the baton on, and then over to Benny for the real Q&A.
Okay, sure. So thank you, and welcome everyone who's watching us right now. And a huge thanks, of course, to the donors for enabling this program. So let me say, I think actually AI is a really nice example where there's a lot of collaboration between academia and industry. There's a lot of faculty members in science and that actually work in different companies at least part of the week. And vice versa. There's a lot of collaborations and joint papers that are written between people, for example, in Google and academia. So it's a nice example of an area where there is a lot of collaboration. But having said that, I think that the emphasis is generally very different. So of course, naturally in companies, there's a business initiative. They have to be profitable, huge sets of data, and there's a lot of focus on the actual data. Whereas I think in academia, we have the privilege. And also, I think it's kind of, we really have to look more at the fundamental issues, right? That maybe in industry, people don't have the time, and it's maybe not as profitable to be considered with. And that's what our research is focused on. But I think it's a broader question, right, of looking at the fundamentals, understanding really the underpinnings of these algorithms. So I think in that sense, the research is very different.
Okay, does anybody else want to chip in, or shall we invite Benny to answer some of the questions that I know are flooding in on the chat box?
Well, maybe I'll just add something to that. It's a very good question, Sheridan. And I think it's really important, seeing it from the point of view of academia, that the private sector recognize that the future of their input, their manpower, is coming essentially from the universities and the research institute. It's very often very difficult to recruit people in this area because the best people are recruited at very high salaries and in very good working conditions to the private sector. So there needs to be a really close partnership to ensure that there's a steady stream of good people coming through. Otherwise, we're going to run out of computer scientists. And maybe I can use that to ask a question that came actually from my wife while you were talking, which maybe Alexandra and Nina specifically could answer, which is that there is still, at least in the UK, I'm not sure about Israel so much, a very large shortage of, a very big imbalance in gender in the recruitment to computer science and engineering in general, but particularly in computer science. I know at UCL we really struggle. And I wondered whether Alexandra or Janina, maybe you could say something to that.
Sure. I wanted also to, first of all, thank you, Benny and Sheridan, for hosting this, and also definitely to thank the donors who make it all possible. And to make these absolutely amazing connections, and I'm very excited to be here. I think it's a great opportunity actually for AI at the moment, because AI has been here for a long time, and it's a recent boom and to some extent a buzzword. We were talking before the show that perhaps nowadays it's a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's also a great opportunity for us to to work in this direction with industry, and it's nice that industry is interested, but at the same time, I think academia is answering those problems at the frontier. But coming back to your main question about women in academia, so yes, definitely it's a upward struggle. In Durham, the reason I moved to Durham is also because I think there's a lot of support to have more women in computer science specifically. And we've been doing some new rounds of hiring recently, and I think well, hopefully, fingers crossed, if they will say yes, our female numbers will grow some more. But I think it's something that you need to do proactively, and it's not so easy. It's a whole cultural setup that's going on. Just to give you a bit of an idea, when I was in Romania a long time ago and learning computer science, there was 60% women in computer science and in software engineering, because it was considered something that you just do with your finger and your brain, and this is all you need, and it's sort of soft, so it's gentle and female-like, right? Whereas hardware was something to log hardware around, and it's much more male. I think that the culture in England certainly is quite different, and a lot of girls are put off to study computer science early on, and we're trying to do a lot of outreach activities and so on and so forth, because we do think that there's a lot of opportunities and chances. I certainly want my daughter to be feeling comfortable to go to do whatever career she wants to, and I hope that the future will look differently. But yes, there's a lot of work to be done in the UK. I'm not 100% sure about Israel, so maybe Gira wants
so I'd actually be happy to add to that. So unfortunately, I think the work in Israel is actually larger than the work to be done in the UK. So I actually head, one of the things that I do in Israel is I head the committee for gender equality in higher education in Israel. So I'm very involved in all of those aspects. We do a lot of work. Actually, this week was a very intense week. We had many meetings because we're trying to pass some new laws in that respect. So I think it's a huge issue in Israel in STEM, and it's something that people are becoming more aware of, and there's more funding to try, even at an official level. So we're working with the government to try and change that. But I think, we could talk at least 2 hours just about that, but I think trying to summarize maybe some of the main issues is that there's still a lot of both explicit, but also a lot of implicit bias. And there's a lot of statistics that show that. I mean, people have a certain image in their mind of what a scientist look like, or what a computer vision person looks like, or computer scientists look like. And, the image people have in their mind very often is not what we look like, right? So it's male. Let's start with that, and glasses, and maybe this nice beard, and yeah, okay. At least you have that part going for you, right? But it's not a young woman with maybe a bunch of kids and who's involved in other things besides just her research, and these things. A lot of statistics and have been done on this, right? There's a lot of implicit bias. People think that they're being fair, but they don't even realize that when they judge things, you're eliminated before you even begin. And a lot of again, a lot of people reflect this on their students without bad intentions, right? This is all the implicit bias. So female students are often not encouraged to continue to do research, and you see that very much in Israel. There's, if you look on the undergrad level, there's still a small percentage of female students in STEM, but maybe it's 20-25%. And then when you go to master's and PhD, it keeps on getting narrower and narrower. And of course, once you get to faculty positions, the pyramid is getting more and more narrow. And of course, fewer and fewer reach the top. And there's a lot of differences. Even one of the things we noticed recently in our committee is that even in entering positions in academia, so any woman who got a faculty position in STEM in Israel, has to be superb, right? She's not going to be not as good as any other male because she already went through the whole process. And still we see that in Israel, the percentage of men who enter as senior. So in Israel, the ranking is a little bit different. Instead of assistant associate, there's kind of first researcher and then senior, and the amount of men they almost all start at senior level, whereas many of the female candidates do not. So even there's already a discrepancy, and these are already people at the top. So again, I don't want, we could go on for hours about this, but definitely it's an issue. And I think I do want to comment that there's a lot of attention being given to it. And just to summarize on a more optimistic note, I think one of the things that people found very effective, and this is what we're doing, and I know a lot of institutions in Israel are looking at it, is to actually start recording these statistics. So once you mandate, committees, faculty members, institutions to record, right? How many woman candidates were invited for an interview? How many were given the position? How many were considered? Without even telling them what decisions to make, but just to record, those statistics. It already helps a little bit to balance that implicit bias, right? To be aware of the fact that these are worthy candidates. So, anyways, there's a lot to be done, but I think there's also a lot of optimism in the sense that people do want to make that change, and we already do have wonderful role models, definitely at the Weizmann Institute. So that's already a good sign.
Yeah, well, we've got two brilliant role models here tonight, so that's good. So can I ask a question that came from Amanda Zief to the educational pair? Maybe Giora could answer this. Can you give us some insight into the way that different people learn differently? Do they use a particular model of different learning styles? Is the question.
Yes, so first of all, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. So, well, people may be different in many ways. For example, they may have different preferences on how to learn, or they may have different skills. So, for example, if people approaching in an online course, they might have different language skills, and that might interfere with the pace in which they can read the material and answer questions. Now, when we have data of a lot of people who are struggling with the material, we can understand exactly what is good for each person, what the difficulties are, and what the ways to help each person. Now, regarding the difference between what we do in academia, so basically we use similar methods to what Amazon is using in order to understand what to sell us, and Facebook is using in order to understand how to influence us. But we are using similar methods in order to understand how to personalize the education to individual needs. So basically we are using similar methods, but to purposes that typically are hard to finance because it's not profitable, and programs like this enable us to do this.
Thank you. So there are several sort of related questions. Maybe I can rephrase them for the for Yonina and Miguel around the question of can AI machines making decisions incorporate ethics in some way? Can they make decisions that are ethical? We expect our doctors and so on to make such ethical decisions. Can computers somehow do this? Miguel, maybe?
I can try to have a go at that particular question. I think it's a very broad question, and I think it's worthwhile to divide it, say, in particular chunks. But let me just mention that nowadays there's many conversations across various committees in society about these broad issues, and in particular whether decisions made by algorithms are ethical or unethical, and what that even means. But I'll give a few examples, and I think one of them relates to whether decisions made by an algorithm are fair, and I think we have already touched upon some of these issues now. So I think there's the need that we develop algorithms that are perceived to be fair in some way, that do not have bias in any particular way. And this is difficult on several accounts. One of them is that much of the data that we use in order to develop these algorithms could be biased to begin with. So there could be, for example, a bias in favor of males against females, as we were discussing right now. And then it turns out that the algorithms are going to inherit all these biases. The other one is, whoever develops the algorithms may also, in some way, pass some of the biases to the algorithms. and therefore there is the danger that we end up with machine learning models and AI techniques that are biased. So people are discussing that at the moment. So people are developing techniques in order to lead to algorithms that provide fair decisions, that are fair, that are not biased. And more importantly, this is also a very wide discussion nowadays in society, and in fact across various stakeholders. It's a discussion that involves computer scientists, but also people that have ethics type of background, people that have legal backgrounds. So it's a very wide discussion. And what I said about, say, decisions or algorithms that provide decisions that are biased, the same applies to other issues, such as, for example, privacy. So some of these algorithms, they can infer, certain signals that normal humans may not be able to infer. So they can really dive into, some aspects that we consider to be private. And therefore, once again, so there's very wide conversations within the society across various stakeholders in order to, develop algorithms, first to define what privacy is, but also to develop algorithms that are privacy preserving in some way. So I think that the ethical question is a very relevant one, and this is something that in fact is being discussed now across various stakeholders, and it involves many elements.
I think we've got time for one last question, relatively short, perhaps. Go back to the educationalists. The question is about the extent to which the working in different countries on educational projects like this one will be influenced by the cultural background of the different countries in a way that perhaps other scientific disciplines are not. That's rephrasing the question.
Okay, I don't know, Kira, you want to take it or should I?
Well, I think you have a very varied background, which might be exactly.
So I think this is actually one of the benefits of this cross-country and across the Israel and UK kind of projects, because we can benefit of learning about each other's cultures. And I'm very excited about this because I myself have been a big traveler. I'm originally Romanian. I also studied for my master's in Denmark for a while. I did my PhD in Japan. I worked also as an assistant professor in the Netherlands. I've been for a while now in the UK, that's true. Has probably something to do with my children and setting a bit of roots here. But culture still fascinates me, and I've been only once to Israel, so I'm looking forward at some point to visit again. And I think it's really interesting to learn about each other, and in this way to enrich the whole experience. Because especially education, it's totally not linear kind of area. There's lots of variables. So, and culture is very, very important. One of them. I mean, we have had studies about, for instance, how to design educational systems based on culture. So just to give you very extreme examples, because I lived in Japan. In Japan, when you go to the bank, you see this little lady that bows at you, and then you do your transaction or whatever it is. The reason being that it's a machine, and machine is much lower level than you are as a human. So it's not socially acceptable for the machine to just tell you to start telling you what to do and say put the money here, or I'll give you the money, or anything very direct like that. So the same thing goes for an educational system. It would just not be acceptable to be basically what would be considered rude to you. Whereas in a different culture like UK, which is very egalitarian to some extent, okay, we can go into this, but it's completely different. The same thing goes when you go to university websites, for instance. In the UK, you see all these happy students on green grass normally. This is sort of the typical UK university first step, first entry kind of visualization. But the problem with that is that, for instance, people from China who are thinking very hierarchical kind of ways, I think this is actually not taking it seriously. I mean, where's the hierarchy? Where's the approval from the different systems, higher levels of the university? Where's the stamps? Where's the seals that we can see, etc. And might actually disregard a university that looks a little bit flimsy in a way. So I think that there's a lot of cultural adaptation to be done in education, and I think we're not even scratching the surface at the moment. So yeah, that's an interesting area.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure we could go on answering questions. We've got loads of questions that we haven't had time to answer, but thank you all very much for answering those questions. And now I'll pass you back to Sheridan.
So, well, thank you. The questions really have been flooding in, and as we've run out of time, what I would say is that we have captured all the questions, and I will certainly make sure, those of you that have asked a question, that we will certainly try and electronically get an answer to you, if not on this virtual cocktail this evening. So, what a fascinating evening this has been. It's really my joy and great pleasure to thank you all for participating, and a really big thanks to you, Benny, for chairing this for us. A big thank you to Janina, to Miguel, to Giora, to Alexandron, and I wish you huge success in your Making Connections collaborations. There are a few people actually from behind the scenes that I also would like to thank, who've helped us put this virtual event together, and I'd really like to thank the team at Eclipse Productions, headed by the master magician Neil and his colleague Marc-Andre, and of course behind the scenes working very hard, my wonderful team of Weitzman UK. It's a small team, but it's a very, very efficient and wonderful team to work even in this virtual situation. I would really like to thank you, our audience, for joining us. It's been a first for us, and maybe a first for you too. I hope you've enjoyed the hour. Whether you've had your cocktail yet or not, I don't know. I'm certainly going to have mine, a real one, and not a virtual one at the end. But really, I think the most important message that I would really hope that you will leave this evening is the absolute importance of international collaborations. The Making Connections program really was set up with a very, very clear vision and message. It's beyond politics. And it's really important that this program continues. And I really want to thank all the donors that have supported us to date. And I would really like to encourage and indeed urge any of you listening and watching us tonight, if you would like to support the Making Connections program, then please visit our website and click the donate button. Everything we get is always valued. And you, our audience, are really, really precious to us at this difficult time. So I hope you've had an enjoyable evening. You know a little bit more about AI than you did before, and certainly know a little bit more about Making Connections. And I think really that's, I'm pretty close to the 7 o'clock cutoff time. So I'd just like to say thank you to you all. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Good night.